Hello and a warm welcome to Federal Special Program Capital Beat. India's top oil companies will start cutting back on the purchases of Russian crude oil in the very near future after the US imposed sanctions on two top Russian oil giants, that is Rosneft and Lukoil. Now, the news about the US sanctions sent global oil prices shooting up in the last 2 days by 3 to 5% to a peak of about 66.02 dollars. Now, what a Reliance spokesperson has shared it with the media, and I'm going to quote: US has given companies time till November 21st to wind down their transactions with the Russian oil producers, according to the release on the sanctions. This has been told by a Reliance spokesperson. So the big question now is that if US has imposed sanctions on the Russian oil companies, what does it mean for India? What How will Russia react to this? Because Russia has been a close friend of India. In fact, one of the oldest friends India has had in Russia. And now, if India abandons or stops purchasing oil from Russia, is it not like a humiliation for Russia as well? On the other hand, there is a scheduled ASEAN summit for which all eyes were whether Modi will go for the summit or not. But now Prime Minister Modi is not attending that summit. In fact, he's going to attend that summit virtually. So, how do we see these two situations in context with what's happening between India and America? Joining me this evening is former Ambassador Meera Shankar. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining. We have international affairs expert Sanjay Kapoor also with us. Thank you so much, Sanjay. And I'll begin with Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ambassador Shankar, how would you really see this news of where US has imposed sanctions on the Russian oil companies? How does it pan out for India in terms of its relationship with Russia as well?
Well, it certainly makes it more difficult for India to buy oil from Russia. But Russia, I suppose, will try to find ways to get around the sanctions. Normally they set up dummy companies or new companies through which it can be routed, or it's through third countries like Turkey. Sometimes I think Turkey was one of the routes through which oil used to go. So when it was sanctioned. So I think that it reflects, in a sense, President Trump's frustration that his peace efforts in Ukraine have not made progress, and that President Putin is not responding to proposals for a ceasefire. And indeed, Trump had bought President Putin's proposal that instead of a ceasefire, which only postpones the thorny issue of what kind of political settlement there will be, they should straight away start discussing a political settlement, which will be a final settlement. Otherwise, the fighting is just going to go on. And on the other hand, the European position today is that you first have a ceasefire. The concession they are now making is that it can be on as is, where is basis. And then in the meanwhile, discussions can start on a political settlement. So the positions between the two sides, Russia, which says, there's no point in a ceasefire because all it'll do is give time to Ukraine to rearm and to recoup the fatigue because it's running out of soldiers, weapons, resources.
Right.
So it'll help it to recoup and then start fighting again.
Right. No,
And
but
on the
Ambassador
other
Shankar,
hand, the
right.
Ukrainians saying and the Europeans saying that we are not at a stage where we are ready to surrender territory, but we can accept a temporary ceasefire and see
Right.
what shape a final settlement takes. So it
Right. But
reflects
no,
President
Ambassador,
Trump's frustration at being
right.
unable to bridge the gap between these two sides.
No, there is a point where you say that Donald Trump looks frustrated, but uh, for India, what does it mean? If India was heavily dependent on buying oil from Russia, in fact, about 35% of the oil purchase was from Russia now, and now if India stops purchasing, uh, is it not going to be a big mess up UAE economy because we are heavily dependent on oil? Oil is one of the biggest bulwarks of the economic strength. So how does it shape for India, and how will the Indian government manage it? Because there is a lot of face loss in all these weeks. What we have heard always, how the MEA has reacted, that no, there was no phone conversation between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi. They've denied it all this while, except for the Diwali greetings, and that day also Prime Minister, Donald Trump kept on saying that no, India has agreed that they will stop buying oil from Russia. So, what does it mean? Is it not a big face loss for Prime Minister Modi? How is he going to convince the people? Is it not equivalent to almost buckling down under Trump's pressure?
Well, I suppose, the US is using its economic clout because all companies will take into account what would be the consequences of actually violating the US sanctions. If they feel they can live with it, they will go ahead and violate the sanctions. If they feel that the consequences of violating the sanctions will hit them harder, than actually going ahead with purchases, they will observe the sanctions. So I suppose all private companies do this assessment, and most of the oil that India has been buying, because our public sector undertakings have cut back, over a period of time on Russian oil purchases for commercial reasons. But our private sector companies, particularly Reliance, and I think there's a Russian company, Niara, which was earlier Essar, which was bought out, I think, by Rosneft. And these are the two main companies which have been importing Russian oil for refining. Now, the consequences for India are A, that we have to assess, our companies will assess to what extent and at, what speed, because they still have a month. It's not as though it's going to kick in immediately. They will look for alternative sources, or they will go ahead if they calculate that the consequences of violating the sanctions are something they can live with, or there can be legal or legitimate ways to work around the sanctions by avoiding dollar payments and the US banking system, or if the Russians set up new companies through which the exports are funneled,
Right.
or through third countries, those things will obviously continue.
No,
But the
but
consequences, Nilu, will also be that the price of oil will go up. And that
yeah,
will hit us, because
absolutely.
we are import dependent for energy.
Right. Also, I was reading, ma'am, somewhere that this Energy Aspects is a London-based consultancy, and they said that Reliance had a windfall profit of about $6 billion just because they were buying discounted Russian crude for 3 years. Now, what does it mean for the private sector now? Obviously, the government helped them; they reaped huge profits. Now, when the government policy has failed, how is Reliance, possibly going to react?
Well, I would say that it depends a lot on how the peace discussions over Ukraine progress, because there's still a month, and India's options would be somewhat limited and dependent on Putin and Trump having a handshake.
Okay, so Trump and Putin might have a handshake, but where is India reduced to? Sanjay, I'm going to come to you because political flack. Prime Minister Modi has faced a huge backlash politically on the domestic front. Jairam Ramesh has been tweeting consistently that how we have buckled under the pressure. Modi proposes, Trump disposes. All those tweets, have been coming along, and for the last few weeks, we've seen that happening continuously. Now, what does it mean for Prime Minister Modi's image? And Modi is not even attending the ASEAN summit. People have started writing reports that he's trying to avoid the meeting with Donald Trump. So, what does it mean for Modi back home, for his own political constituency?
I think it's deeply embarrassing for India that there's so much pressure coming in from US. We were on the side of the US even before Mr. Trump came in. If you go by former Ambassador Eric Garcetti's statement, that he said in no uncertain terms that we were buying Russian oil at the behest of the U.S. administration. So even our own petroleum minister said this, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. But now we have a situation where the very act is being seen as something that is violative of the international perception about Ukraine and Russia war. And Mr. Trump is trying to make an example of us. So this is rather tragic because we are taken by surprise. Actually, if you ask me, there is a certain kind of sentiment which is visible in the MEA. If you ask me, which suggests nervousness as to what will happen next when it comes to Mr. Trump. What will he do? Because he has too many things that he seems to be against India. Russian oil is just one of them. He could be a few more things because the entire range of issues that are being floated around or that have been suggested at different levels suggest that
No, but Sanjay, sorry to interrupt you. Allow me to interrupt you. That is it now the end of Modi's diplomacy? His diplomacy depended on hugs and kisses, and all that seems to be coming to an end now. It seems that nothing has worked. And the biggest question: where is the foreign minister, S. Shankar? Because we heard that he went to America. Then you had a commerce minister, Piyush Goyal, who went to America. What were they doing? All those meetings have resulted in a nothing. All that has resulted in a cipher.
it's really tragic because what they seem to be doing is to just shore up the stock market by saying is the deal is happening, but nothing
Yeah.
is happening at all because at the end of the day, there are rumors which are just coming in because of the meetings in the US or Washington DC, and one of them suggests that they in fact signed a deal with the US, which is kind of loaded in favor of the United States of America, even in terms of buying, corn, which is piling up in US warehouses. So even this kind of thing is going on. So we're not very sure. There are lots of rumors, there are lots of speculation about how which way it is rolled, but all that is deeply embarrassing. And I think Mr. Modi will find it difficult to find Mr. Trump or to hug him again whenever he meets him because he's avoiding him all the time. He had three occasions till now where he could have met Mr. Trump, but he sidestepped the issue. He's not gone to
Yes.
ASEAN, and nobody does that. It's just 3 days before the ASEAN
So in the near
meeting.
future,
He said,
Which means that probably or possibly we won't see Modi meeting Trump at all.
politics is strange. You don't know really what really works, but what kind of deal might be struck between the two leaders. But Mr. Modi telling Mr. Anwar Ibrahim that he can't come to KL because of Diwali when Diwali was long gone. For many Indians, this is really laughable a suggestion. But that is
Yes.
how international diplomacy works. But let's see how it plays out. It doesn't seem very
No, but
exciting.
there's another worrisome question, Sanjay, and I'm going to ask Ambassador Shankar also on that. That what happened to those backroom maneuverings which were happening in the past? Donald Trump took over as president in January, and the mess around the tariffs was known long before. But all these months, what has happened? I mean, look at what has happened and how things have unfolded for the last 7, 8 months. I'm just wondering that what were those backroom meetings all about? I mean, we kept on insisting from our side, and Donald Trump or his team kept on denying everything, kept on saying no to everything.
So, I remember reading a small news item in maybe Economic Times or Times of India or somewhere where it says that the negotiators on behalf of India seem to have thrown up their hands and they say that the only way things can work out when both the leaders meet and come to a solution. Because negotiators have gone as far as they can do, but that's not enough. So, eventually the two leaders have to meet and thrash out whatever differences they might be having between themselves.
No, but Ambassador Shankar, now you have a recalcitrant president in Donald Trump who's not ready to hear you. He's very obstinate. But what does it mean now? Countries like India, they are paying the price. What I'm also given to understand is that European Union and UK, they are also toughening measures against Russia. And the latest moves, they target over about 200 ships from what is called the shadow fleet, which cannot access European ports and banks. So what happens now? Even the European Union, UK, and countries like India, are they going to pay the price for the obstinacy of Donald Trump? Or is there a way out? The countries can work around some kind of an alternative.
Well, I think it, as I said, it will depend on how the Ukraine talks go and whether Putin is going to hold out, till he conquers all the eastern provinces that he has annexed to Russia, or he's willing to give some space and have a ceasefire as is where is, and also on whether Ukraine agrees to give assurances that it will not join NATO. I think these will be bottom lines for the Russians. I think really Trump has to make up his mind one way or the other. How is he going to pressurize the two sides to reduce their gap? Because without that, they are not going to be able to have a peace deal in Ukraine.
No, but Ambassador
And,
Shankar,
and then the consequences of that are being felt by countries like India and indeed the entire world, which will pay for higher energy prices. Even China, for the moment, has stopped, Chinese public sector companies have stopped importing Russian oil till they assess the impact of these sanctions and the consequences. China floats new companies then to buy oil. So then, if that company is a standalone company with no business in the United States or Europe, then it is in a position to take the heat of sanctions.
no, but Ambassador Shankar, what I want to ask you is that did India fall short anywhere in terms of its diplomatic efforts? The question is that could we have done something more? Uh, Everything has a threshold limit, but could we have performed better? Could our foreign policy, or maybe in terms of the efforts which we undertook, could that have been better? Maybe the things would have worked out. Because people do say that this is like a foreign policy failure on the part of the Modi government. As a foreign diplomat, do you think that, I mean, could we have done something more to salvage the situation?
Well, I think a lot has to do with President Trump's personal peeve, at our denying the US role in bringing about some kind of halt to the cross border conflict of Operation Sindoor. And I think the downward trend actually starts from there. And we've seen that President
Yes.
Trump personalizes his foreign policy. And like some of our political leaders, he neither forgives nor forgets.
Yeah.
And so, in some sense, we are paying the consequence of
No, but
that.
isn't it like we are seeing two different sides of the
And
foreign
then
policy?
what
No.
what happens is that once once a country like US embarks on a certain path, then there's a momentum which carries it forward because they, as the biggest power in the world, don't want to lose face. And you become collateral damage.
Right.
You
No,
may
but
not.
Ambassador Shankar, sorry to interrupt you, but what you said that, Donald Trump tries to personalize everything. He tries to personalize a foreign policy. So Donald Trump personalizes it. And if you see how Prime Minister Modi has been, he tries to politicize the foreign policy. So one personalizes and the other one politicizes. So what happens to the diplomatic relations between nations? And let's not just center only on India and America, but we do have relations with other countries. So how is it really going to unfold?
Well, I think, we are trying to find ways to make up for the big gap in our economic diplomacy and our economic relations, which the tensions with the US has left, because the 50% tariffs means that a number of sectors in India which are labor intensive will be impacted adversely, and there will be a loss of jobs in those sectors. So we are trying to, I think the government is trying to step up domestic demand through the GST reductions, be, quicken the pace of concluding foreign trade agreements, including with the UK, which has just come into effect, But with the EU, where negotiations are going on, with other countries where we are discussing FTAs, and a thrust to finding new markets. But all this is going to take time to materialize. It's not something which will give you an immediate opening to compensate for the economic damage that will be caused to the labor intensive sectors like garments, gems and jewelry, leather, shrimps. These are all sectors which generate jobs, and where if you have a huge reduction in exports, then you will have job losses.
True. So the situation is really precarious. I'll come to you, Sanjay, now. How would you really summarize? I mean, it's a foreign policy failure. It's failing on the political front, the domestic political front as well for India. And the whole world, it seems, is in a bind because of this kind of a recalcitrant behavior of Donald Trump. So, how would you summarize the things? And back home in India, how does it really result into when it comes to Prime Minister Modi, or how the foreign policy is being handled by our own diplomats and the foreign minister?
I think India is a case of serious misreading of the situation. Mr. Trump coming to power was seen as something that would give a leg up to India. India got it all wrong, primarily because they thought they were on the right side of the US, and now they find that everything they were doing in the past has been seemingly makes Mr. Trump see red. And that is where I think the problem lies. He doesn't like many things that India stands for, and whether it is buying oil is just one of the things. But the it will have a very dangerous implications for India, because many of his foreign policy engagements and arrangements that it has been part of, like BRICS, that comes under serious threat. Next year we are the chairman of the summit, presiding over it, and I'm not very sure how it will look, because if we submit to the pressure coming in from the US on not buying Russian oil, then Russia would be very angry, and Russia is the center, is the fulcrum around which you have the BRICS entirely woven around. And if that happens, then what happens to BRICS? Even China would be deeply upset if we continue, because what I hear from the diplomatic circles, the Chinese are only asking one question: will we submit to the US or not? And how soon will we do that? Because we are also in advanced negotiations with the Chinese on many issues, because for quite a while we were not doing business with them. We have restored flights with China, but that's about all. What about investment coming in from China? Because last year, I remember in the Niti Aayog projection, it was shown that India would be happy if some kind of investment come in from China. But if that is not coming and they seemingly are hostile towards us, so we actually caught between two different pincer movements. We've fallen between two stools. Either are the BRICS countries with us, because we would be not buying oil from them or from Russia, or US. So what do we do? So this is a very difficult situation. It's not something that we can feel nice. And India is not the only one which has suffered. I mean, look at any country which you can say has done well with Mr. Trump around. Where you look at Canada, Canada is crouching at the moment. They don't know what to do with all the failures that are staring at Mr. Carney. He wants to come and talk to India. Similarly, there are others also who don't know how to deal with it. But India has its own problems, primarily because its domestic policy is actually impacting its foreign policy. Our neighborhood is largely hostile towards us, and we need to worry on many counts. We need to take a hard look as to where it is all wrong, and whether we can correct it, so that some correction has to begin, so that the others countries which are upset with us can also start coming back and rallying around us.
Actually. So, how these corrective measures would be taken up is anybody's guess. So, we'll have to just wait and watch how things unfold for India vis-a-vis India, America, and India, Russia as well. We'll have to end it here. Thank you so much, Ambassador Shankar, for joining. Sanjay, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.